received a call. It was my son's girlfriend's phone, and when I picked up the phone, it wasn't a listener on the other end. It was a man who was upset. I asked what was wrong. Eventually, Alyssa came on the phone and said that her and Joe had been involved in a serious accident. I kept asking, how is Joe? How is Joe? And she told me that he still had a pulse. So I waited for 20 minutes and said I would go to the hospital. Could she find out where the hospital was that he would be? And I waited in work, and then 20 minutes later the phone rang, and it was a lady this time on the phone who I didn't know, and she told me, sorry Mr. Keane, unfortunately your son has died. She was a nurse and she tried her best to save Joe and she couldn't. He'd suffered a massive head injury. And then from that point your world just collapses. You know you've got to keep it together, because you have to tell my wife and my daughter. So you kind of go into a mode where you've got to get home. You've got to tell the people who matter the most in your world what's gone on, even though your head and your heart are just destroyed with the information that you've just received. The thought of your child dying is just, I can't begin to describe how that feels, and I would not want anybody else to suffer what we as a family had to suffer. He was such a kind, sensitive, funny lad. He had the world at his feet. He was qualified in law. He was doing well in his job. He was saving up to get married with his girlfriend. And she had to suffer being the driver of a vehicle where Joe was killed by somebody who decided to get behind the wheel of a truck after drinking all night and taking drugs, without any thought for the consequences of what that would do to people's lives. Well, our lives will never be the same again, and we miss him every day. He was loved, he still is loved, and the thought that other families go through this still because people think it's a good idea to drink and drive, or take drugs and drive. It just beggars belief that people think that's a good idea. The amount of people who came up to me at his funeral and said Joe was so kind at work, young starters, people who were younger than him, would come up and just say, on my first day, I was struggling a bit, and Joe came up and asked me, was I okay? And if there's anything he could help me with. And they remember that. And as a person, I think that defines you really, to show that you are well regarded and quietly confident in his peer group of friends who are absolutely devastated by his loss. We still see Joe's friends, they still come here, I still feed them, and they are such a lovely, well-balanced group of lads like Joe was, and to see the effect that his loss had on them is hard as well, because when you lose your son, your child, it's not just the loss that you feel, you also grieve for other people as well who've lost him. I can get equally as upset thinking about Joe's friends as I do for my own personal loss, because they're just young people. They shouldn't have to suffer the loss of their best pal. I would ask them just to stop and think. It's difficult sometimes when somebody's had a drink or they've taken drugs, because their decision-making process might be impaired anyway. So if you can have some positive input there to stop them, to take some ownership yourself and say to them, just stop and think what could happen to somebody's lives. Even if you're not even concerned about your own life, think about the impact it could have on other people's lives if you're involved in a collision where somebody either suffers life-changing injuries or worse, again, they die. think about the effect that that has on their family, the people they leave behind, all the possibilities that person had in life just ended just through one selfish act. So just stop, walk or get a taxi and think about other people.